The universe operates on principles we understand: physics, chemistry, the fundamental laws of cause and effect. Starfleet has cataloged thousands of phenomena, from subspace inversions to temporal anomalies. But what happens when something defies every sensor, every theory, every rational explanation? What happens when the impossible doesn't just appear, it declares itself inevitable? The USS Enterprise-D was conducting a routine survey of the neutral zone border when Lieutenant Commander Data's console erupted with warnings. "Captain, I am detecting a massive subspace distortion at bearing 273 Mark V. The energy signature is inconsistent with known spatial phenomena." Captain Jean-Luc Picard rose from his command chair, his eyes narrowing at the view screen. On screen, the stars twisted. Not metaphorically, they literally twisted, as if reality itself was being wrung like wet cloth. A wound opened in space, purple and black energy crackling around its edges. It wasn't a wormhole. It wasn't a subspace rupture. It was something else entirely. "Shields up," Picard commanded. "Red alert." The klaxon blared through the ship as the distortion expanded. Through the tear in space-time, something emerged. It was massive, a warship of design unlike anything in Starfleet's databases. Angular, brutal, its hull scarred by what appeared to be recent weapons fire. As it cleared the dimensional breach, the wound collapsed behind it with a flash that momentarily blinded their sensors. "Hail them," Picard said. Worf's hands moved across tactical. "No response, Captain. The vessel is drifting. Life support appears functional, but propulsion systems are offline. I am detecting a single life form aboard." "One?" Counselor Troy leaned forward, her empathic senses already probing. Her face paled. "Captain, I'm sensing incredible willpower and purpose. Such overwhelming purpose that it feels like gravity." Data's fingers danced across his console. "Captain, the vessel's hull composition contains elements that should not exist in stable form. The energy residue suggests it has traversed not merely distance, but dimensional boundaries. This ship is not from our universe." Picard absorbed this information with the calm of a man who had faced Q, the Borg, in temporal paradoxes. "Prepare an away team. Commander Riker, Worf, Data, you're with me. Dr. Crusher, meet us in Transporter Room 3. As they materialized aboard the alien vessel, the away team found themselves in corridors that spoke of military efficiency and vast resources. The architecture was neither Federation sleek nor Klingon brutal. It was something else. Purposeful. Cold. "Life signs ahead," Worf reported, his phaser drawn. 60 meters. They found him in what appeared to be a command throne room. He sat still and contemplative, a figure of such physical presence that even Worf tensed. He was massive, over 2 meters tall, powerfully built, his skin a shade of purple that sensors confirmed was natural biology, not cosmetic. His armor was golden and blue, clearly advanced technology, and his eyes held a terrible intelligence. "I am Captain Jean-Luc Picard of the Federation Starship Enterprise. You've entered Federation space through what appears to be a dimensional anomaly. We offer assistance." The figure stood slowly, and the simple act carried such weight that Picard felt Worf shift into a defensive stance beside him. When he spoke, his voice was deep, measured, inexorable. "I am Thanos of Titan, and I have not entered your space by accident." He surveyed them with eyes that had seen galaxies burn. "Tell me, Captain Picard, does your Federation understand the meaning of balance?" The question hung in the air like a death sentence. If you want to see more characters enter the Star Trek universe, hit that subscribe button and drop the name of a character you'd want to see in the comments below. Live long and prosper. Dr. Crusher's tricorder hummed as she scanned Thanos from a safe distance. "Captain, his physiology is remarkable. Cellular structure unlike anything in our database. Strength and durability that exceed even Klingon norms by a factor of 3. He's been exposed to radiation that should be lethal, yet shows no degradation." "Balance," Picard repeated, his diplomatic training keeping his voice level despite Troy's warning hand signal. "An interesting opening question. Perhaps you'd elaborate on what you mean by balance, while we discuss how you came to be here." Thanos moved toward a viewport, his steps deliberate. Behind him, the Enterprise-D hung in space like a promise of civilization. "In my universe, resources are finite. Life expands exponentially. The mathematics are simple. Eventually, the equation balances itself through suffering, through starvation, through war. I sought to impose balance before collapse became inevitable. Tell me, Captain, what prevents such collapse in your Federation? Replicator technology, Data offered with characteristic precision. Matter synthesis from energy allows us to postpone the inevitable, Thanos interrupted, though not unkindly. Energy is not infinite, android. Even your matter synthesis draws from somewhere. Your Federation encompasses how many worlds? 200? And when it is 2,000? 20,000? When every star has been harnessed and still life demands more? Picard felt the conversation shifting into dangerous waters. This wasn't a madman ranting. This was a philosopher presenting a thesis. We believe that ingenuity and cooperation can overcome scarcity, that life's value isn't measured against resources but noble sentiment. Thanos turned back to face them. I've heard similar words from 1,000 worlds before they descended into chaos. I have seen what happens when idealism meets mathematical reality. The universe is not cruel, Captain. It is simply finite. I made myself willing to do what others could not, to be the balance. You speak of yourself in past tense, Picard observed. A shadow crossed Thanos' face, something that might have been regret in a being capable of such emotion. The Infinity Stones do not exist here. I can feel their absence like missing limbs. Whatever weapon the Romulans fired at the boundary of your reality, it created a resonance. I was pulled through. My fleet is scattered. My purpose, he paused, requires reevaluation. Riker stepped forward. You mentioned Romulans. How do you know about them? Your vessel's computer core is remarkably unprotected against quantum-level intrusion, Thanos said. I've spent 3 hours learning your Federation, your enemies, your ideals. A fascinating universe, Captain. So much abundance. Such optimism. His expression was unreadable. It may be the most dangerous place I've ever encountered. The Enterprise away team exchanged glances. They'd come prepared for a first contact scenario or a rescue operation. Instead, they'd found something far more complex, a being of immense power and intelligence, wielding a philosophy that directly challenged everything Starfleet represented. And somewhere in the neutral zone, Romulan sensors were undoubtedly tracking every moment of this encounter. The Enterprise conference room had hosted countless diplomatic negotiations, but none quite like this. Thanos sat at the far end of the table, his massive frame making the standard Starfleet chair seem inadequate. Picard occupied the opposite end, with his senior staff arrayed between them like pieces on a chessboard. The Mad Titan had agreed to transport aboard for formal discussions, while his damaged vessel was tractored into a secure position. Your replicators, Thanos began without preamble, are impressive, but they operate on energy-matter conversion principles. Where does the energy originate? Data responded with his characteristic precision. The Enterprise-D is powered by a matter-antimatter reaction regulated by dilithium crystals. The energy output is sufficient for one vessel. Thanos leaned forward. Multiply that by every ship, every starbase, every planetary replicator network across 200 worlds. Now project that consumption forward 1,000 years, 10,000. Where is your dilithium then, Commander Data? Where is your antimatter? The Federation has extensive mining operations and Chief Engineer Geordi LaForge started. Finite operations extracting finite resources, Thanos interrupted, his tone almost gentle, as if explaining to children. I've reviewed your technical databases. Dilithium crystals form under specific geological conditions. They can be recrystallized but not created ex nihilo. You are, at best, 3 centuries from a resource crisis that will make your current conflicts seem quaint. Picard steepled his fingers. Even if we accept your projection, which our economists and scientists would dispute, your solution in your own universe was genocide on an unimaginable scale. You believe killing half of all life creates balance? I believe mathematics creates balance, Captain. I simply enforced it. Thanos' eyes held no malice, which somehow made his words more chilling. Random, dispassionate, fair to rich and poor alike. A mercy killing to prevent endless suffering. Counselor Troy spoke softly from her position beside Picard. You truly believe that. There's no deception in you. You see yourself as merciful. Because I am. Thanos gestured toward the view screen showing the stars beyond. I've walked on worlds where children fought for scraps while their parents starved, where overpopulation turned paradise into wasteland. I offered salvation, and they called me mad. Then I showed them the alternative. I left half their people alive, with twice the resources. Within a generation, those worlds thrived. They cursed my name, but their children lived. By that logic, Picard said carefully, you're simply delaying the inevitable. In another generation, populations recover. Your balance is temporary. For the first time, Thanos smiled, a grim expression devoid of warmth. You understand the problem, then. In my universe, I required the Infinity Stones to make the balance permanent, to ensure that resources would naturally limit themselves, that life would exist in harmony with available matter and energy. Here, he paused, here I find a universe that claims to have solved the equation differently. I am genuinely curious whether your optimism is visionary or simply naive. Worf's voice carried barely restrained hostility. You speak of mass murder as though it were agriculture. The Klingon Empire has faced extinction and rebuilt through honor and strength, not slaughter. The Klingon Empire, Thanos replied, turning his gaze to the security chief, maintains its military power by conquering resource-rich worlds and subjugating their populations. You've simply externalized your balance equation. Someone else suffers so Klingons may thrive. At least my approach was impartial. Worf's hand moved toward his phaser, but Picard raised a hand. That's enough. Thanos, you've agreed to these discussions in good faith. I want to understand your perspective, but I need you to understand ours. The Federation was built on the principle that all life has inherent value, that cooperation and innovation can overcome scarcity. We've proven this across 2 centuries. 2 centuries, Thanos echoed. A blink. I am over 1,000 years old, Captain. I've watched empires rise on such principles. I've returned centuries later to find them dust and bone. The conference room fell silent. The weight of that statement, the sheer temporal perspective, settled over them like a shroud. Dr. Crusher broke the tension. From a medical standpoint, I'm curious about your physiology. You've survived exposure to energies that would vaporize most humanoids. Your cellular regeneration is extraordinary. Are all Titans like you? They were. Something ancient and painful flickered across Thanos' face. Titan was a paradise once. Overcrowded, yes, but beautiful. I warned them, showed them the projections, the mathematical inevitability. They rejected my solution, called it monstrous. So I watched as my world tore itself apart, fighting over dwindling resources. Watched my people cannibalize their own civilization. He looked directly at Picard. I was not born the Mad Titan, Captain. I was made one by watching idealism die slowly, while everyone pretended the mathematics would somehow change. Riker leaned back in his chair. So you're saying we're doomed to repeat your world's fate? That our Federation is just another Titan, waiting to collapse? I'm saying that I've never encountered a species that solved the problem of infinite growth, meeting finite resources through hope and cooperation alone. But, Thanos gestured around the Enterprise, your technology is remarkable. Your society has achieved a level of post-scarcity I've rarely seen. Perhaps you are the exception, or perhaps you're simply earlier in the cycle than you realize. Picard stood, signaling an end to this phase of discussion. We'll need to present your situation to Starfleet Command. You're an unexpected visitor from another universe, making statements that many will interpret as threats. I need to know, what are your intentions while you're here? Thanos rose as well, his presence dominating the room. I intend to observe, Captain, to learn whether your Federation truly has found another path, or whether you're simply postponing an inevitable reckoning. And I intend to repair my ship and determine if return to my universe is even possible. And if you determine that our way doesn't work? Troy asked quietly. The Mad Titan looked at her with eyes that had ordered the deaths of trillions. Then I would offer you the mercy I offered my own people. Before your Federation tears itself apart fighting over scraps, I would impose balance. Painlessly, fairly, permanently. He said it without malice, without anger, like he was discussing agricultural planning, and somehow that made it infinitely worse. You'll remain aboard your vessel under guard, Picard said firmly. We'll provide engineering assistance for repairs, but any action you take beyond that will be met with force. Of course, Captain. Thanos moved toward the door. I expected nothing less from a civilization built on rules and idealism. But understand, I've broken stronger civilizations than yours when mathematics demanded it. Your phasers and photon torpedoes are irrelevant to me. What matters is whether your philosophy can withstand scrutiny. As Thanos was escorted out by a full security detail, the senior staff remained in the stunned silence. Finally, Geordi spoke. Is anyone else terrified by how reasonable he sounds? That's what makes him dangerous, Picard replied, staring at the closed door. He's not insane. He's not evil in the conventional sense. He's a utilitarian who's seen his philosophy proven correct, by his measure, thousands of times. He genuinely believes he's right. Data tilted his head. Captain, if his projections about Federation resource consumption are accurate, then we have centuries to find solutions, Data. Centuries to innovate, to discover new energy sources, to evolve beyond our current limitations. Picard turned to face his crew. That's what separates us from Thanos. We believe in growth and adaptation. He believes in culling and stasis. Sir, Worf interjected, we must inform Starfleet immediately, and we should assume the Romulans already know about him. Picard nodded grimly. Indeed, and that presents our next problem. If the Romulans or any other power sees Thanos as a potential weapon or ally, he didn't need to finish the thought. Somewhere in the neutral zone aboard a Romulan warbird, Commander Sella was reviewing the same sensor data, and she was smiling. 3 days passed with Thanos confined to his vessel, the Sanctuary II, while Starfleet Command debated and the Enterprise crew worked to understand exactly what had fallen into their laps. Picard had spent hours in further conversations with the Titan, each one a philosophical chess match that left the captain more unsettled than the last. In his ready room, Picard reviewed the transcripts while sipping Earl Grey tea. Thanos spoke with the precision of a mathematician and the conviction of a prophet. He didn't rant or threaten. He explained. That was perhaps most disturbing of all. The door chimed. Come. Counselor Troi entered, her expression troubled. Captain, I need to discuss something about our guest. I've been monitoring the crew's psychological responses to his presence. And they're afraid as expected, but it's more complex than that. Troi sat across from him. Some of them, a small but growing number, find his arguments compelling. Not the genocide, but the underlying logic about resource scarcity. He's making them question assumptions about Federation abundance they've never examined. Picard set down his tea. Thanos is doing exactly what he said he would, testing our philosophy. He's a mirror showing us uncomfortable questions we prefer not to ask. There's something else. Troi leaned forward. When I sense his emotions, there's no malice, no sadism, just absolute certainty. And underneath that, something like grief. He's mourned for every life he's taken. He simply believes the alternative would be worse. That doesn't absolve him, Counselor. No, but it makes him dangerous in a different way. A madman we could dismiss. A monster we could simply oppose. But Thanos is neither. He's a rational actor pursuing what he genuinely believes is the greatest good. She paused. How do you convince someone like that they're wrong? Before Picard could respond, his comm badge chirped. Bridge to Captain Picard. Worf's voice carried urgency. We have incoming vessels. 3 Romulan warbirds decloaking at the edge of our sensor range. Picard was on his feet instantly. On my way. Battle stations. The bridge was already at red alert when he emerged from his ready room. On the view screen, 3 Diderotix-class warbirds hung in space like birds of prey, their wings spread in unmistakable threat posture. Hailing frequencies, Picard commanded. The view screen shifted to show Commander Sella, her blonde hair and Romulan features a stark reminder of her heritage. Captain Picard, how fortuitous to find you here, so close to the neutral zone, and with such interesting cargo. Commander Sella, you're in Federation space, state your business. Sella's smile was predatory. Oh, I think we both know my business, Captain. 3 days ago, you encountered a vessel of unknown origin that emerged from a dimensional rift, a vessel containing a being of considerable power and strategic value. The Romulan Star Empire wishes to extend diplomatic relations. The individual in question is under Federation protection. Protection? Sella laughed. From what I've gleaned from our sensor readings, Captain, your guest could tear through your shields and hull like paper if he chose. No, you're not protecting him. You're trying to decide what to do with him before someone else does. On the tactical display, Worf reported quietly, "Captain, 2 more warbirds have decloaked behind us. We are surrounded." Picard kept his expression neutral. "What do you want, Sela?" "I want to speak with Thanos of Titan, directly, without Starfleet mediating every word." She leaned forward. "You see, Captain, while you've been philosophizing with him about the nature of balance and morality, we've been analyzing what he represents. A being from another universe, possessing knowledge and perspective beyond our own. The Romulan Empire understands the value of such assets. He's not an asset. He's a sentient being with rights under Federation law." "Federation law?" Sela's contempt was palpable. "How very like you, Picard, to immediately assume jurisdiction over someone who explicitly challenges your precious Federation principles. Has it occurred to you that Thanos might prefer to speak with people who understand that survival sometimes requires difficult choices?" The tactical situation was deteriorating. 5 warbirds could destroy the Enterprise, and they all knew it. But Picard also knew that Sela wouldn't have come personally unless she believed she could win Thanos to her side through persuasion rather than force. "Bridge to Sanctuary 2, Picard said, opening a channel. "Thanos, you should know that." "I'm aware, Captain." The Titan's voice was calm over the comm. 5 Romulan warbirds, standard D'Deridex configuration. Impressive vessels. Their artificial quantum singularity drives are crude but effective. And I've been monitoring Commander Sela's transmission. A pause. She raises interesting points. Picard felt ice in his veins. "You're considering her offer." "I'm considering all possibilities as I said I would. The Romulan Empire operates on principles of strategic pragmatism. They understand that idealism is a luxury, not a virtue. Perhaps they deserve to be heard." Sela's smile widened. "You see, Captain? Not everyone shares your naive worldview. Thanos, I'm Commander Sela of the Romulan Star Empire. We've observed your conversations with Captain Picard. We know you speak of balance, of difficult choices for the greater good. These are concepts the Romulan people understand intimately." "Do they?" Thanos' voice carried a hint of curiosity. "Tell me, Commander, what does the Romulan Empire know of balance?" "We know that the Federation's idealism is a fantasy built on the backs of their superior technology and abundant resources," Sela replied smoothly. "We know that when resources become scarce, even humans revert to their baser instincts. We've seen it in their history: world wars, genocides, colonialism. The only thing that changed was their technology, not their nature." "A cynical perspective," Thanos observed, "but not without merit." Picard stepped forward. "Thanos, the Romulans aren't interested in your philosophy. They want to weaponize you against the Federation. Sela sees you as a tool, nothing more." "And you see me as what, Captain? A problem to be contained? A threat to be neutralized?" Thanos' tone carried no accusation, just curiosity. "At least the Romulans are honest about their intentions." Riker moved beside Picard, speaking quietly. "Sir, if he sides with the Romulans, then we face an enemy with strategic genius, superhuman abilities, and no regard for life as we understand it." Picard finished grimly. Sela pressed her advantage. "Thanos, the Federation will try to contain you, study you, ultimately neutralize you because you represent everything their soft philosophy cannot tolerate. But the Romulan Empire? We would offer you resources, intelligence, the freedom to pursue your goals. All we ask is mutual cooperation." "Goals," Thanos repeated. "My goal was to bring balance to an infinite universe using infinite power. Here I have neither infinity, so I must ask myself, what use is philosophy without the means to enforce it?" The bridge was silent. Every officer waited to see which way the Mad Titan would turn. "Commander Sela," Thanos finally said, "your offer is noted. Captain Picard, your hospitality has been educational. I propose a different arrangement. I will speak with both your Federation and the Romulan Empire. I will observe both your societies, study your approaches to governance and resource management. Then I will decide which, if either, deserves my allegiance." "That's not acceptable," Worf growled. "You are in Federation custody." "Am I?" Thanos' response carried dark amusement. "Commander Worf, your security teams have been monitoring my vessel with admirable diligence, but they haven't truly understood what they're monitoring. My ship may be damaged, but its weapon systems are operational, and I am Thanos. Custody is something that happens to lesser beings. Picard felt the situation spiraling out of control. Thanos, don't! The Sanctuary 2's engines flared to life. Alarms shrieked across the Enterprise as the alien vessel's power output spiked beyond anything they detected before. Worf's console lit up with warnings. He's charging weapons, the Klingon roared. Shields at maximum. Belay that, Thanos said calmly. I'm not targeting your ship, Captain. I'm demonstrating a point. My vessel's main cannon operates on principles your science hasn't discovered. Observe. A lance of purple energy erupted from Sanctuary 2, not toward the Enterprise or the Romulan vessels, but toward a small asteroid in the system's belt. The rock, roughly 4 kilometers in diameter, simply ceased to exist. No explosion, no debris, just instant molecular disintegration. The bridge crew stared in horror at the display. That, Thanos said, is what I'm capable of at perhaps 30% power with a damaged ship. Imagine what I could do at full capacity, with a fleet, with time to study your technology and integrate it with my own. He paused. Now, shall we discuss terms like reasonable beings, or shall I demonstrate further? Sella's expression had shifted from confidence to calculation. Even she hadn't expected this level of power. Picard knew he was facing a no-win scenario. Force was off the table. Containment was impossible, which left only one option, the one Starfleet had always relied on: diplomacy. The conference, if it could be called that, took place in neutral space, a region between Federation territory and the neutral zone, where neither power held advantage. The Enterprise and 5 Romulan warbirds maintained cautious distance, while Thanos' Sanctuary 2 positioned itself equidistant from both forces, a physical manifestation of his uncommitted stance. Picard materialized in a cargo bay that Thanos had converted into a meeting space. The Titan stood before a holographic display showing star charts of both Federation and Romulan territories, his fingers moving through the data with practiced ease. Your computer systems are remarkably forthcoming once properly queried, Thanos said without turning. I've spent the last 6 hours reviewing the political landscape of this quadrant. Fascinating. The Federation, the Klingon Empire, the Romulan Star Empire, the Cardassian Union, all competing for resources and influence while pretending their conflicts are about ideology. They are about ideology, Picard replied, Data and Worf flanking him. The Federation believes in cooperation and shared prosperity. The Romulans believe in strategic superiority through secrecy and control. These aren't pretenses, they're fundamental differences in how we view civilization. Different strategies for the same goal: survival. Thanos gestured to a section of the map showing the neutral zone. You and the Romulans have fought 3 major conflicts in the past century. Each time, the war ended, not because one side embraced the other's ideology, but because the resource cost of continuing exceeded the potential gain. Economics masquerading as principles. Before Picard could respond, the air shimmered with Romulan transporter technology. Commander Sella materialized with 2 Tal Shiar guards, her expression carefully neutral. How thoughtful of you to invite us both, Thanos, she said, though I notice you've kept us separated from direct confrontation. Wise. Strategic, Thanos corrected. If I'm to choose sides or forge my own path, I need to understand what each of you truly represents beyond your propaganda. He moved to a secondary display showing resource distribution charts. Captain Picard speaks of cooperation and abundance. Commander Sella speaks of pragmatic survival, but the mathematics tell a different story. The hologram shifted to show complex projections, population growth curves, resource consumption rates, energy expenditure models. Thanos had clearly spent his confinement period doing more than observing. He'd been analyzing. The Federation currently encompasses 154 member worlds, plus 73 protectorates and associated colonies. Thanos began, his tone that of a lecturer presenting irrefutable data. Your replicator technology has indeed created post-scarcity conditions for basic necessities. Impressive. But your energy consumption doubles every 37 years. Your dilithium reserves, even with recycling, will reach critical depletion in 293 years at current consumption rates. Those projections don't account for new discoveries. Data interjected. The Federation's exploration fleet constantly identifies new dilithium sources and alternative energy technologies. They account for discovery rates based on historical data, Thanos replied, and they assume no major disruptions, no wars, no disasters, No unexpected population spikes? Your optimism is built on statistical outliers becoming the norm. He turned to Sella. The Romulan Empire faces similar challenges but has chosen a different strategy. Military conquest to secure resource-rich systems, artificial quantum singularities that, while elegant, produce less energy than matter-antimatter reactions, while requiring rare element mining that devastates planetary ecosystems. Sella's jaw tightened. We do what we must to ensure our people survive. At the expense of conquered populations. Thanos' tone carried no judgment, just observation. Efficient in the short term, unsustainable long term. The more you conquer, the more resources you require to maintain control. Classic imperial overextension. The Romulan Star Empire will face collapse in approximately 400 years unless you radically alter your expansion strategy. You presume to lecture us on strategy? Sella's voice dripped venom. We've survived for millennia through cunning and strength. You've survived through geographic isolation from major threats, Thanos countered. But that isolation is ending. The Dominion from the Gamma Quadrant, the Borg from the Delta Quadrant, species and collectives that make your empire seem provincial. He gestured to new data appearing on the display. I've accessed what records are available on these threats. They represent existential challenges that neither your current military strength nor the Federation's diplomatic corps can adequately address. Picard felt a chill. Thanos had only been in this universe for days, yet he'd already synthesized strategic intelligence that would take Starfleet intelligence months to compile. The Borg are a problem we're addressing, Picard said carefully. We've successfully resisted them twice. You've survived encounters, Thanos corrected. There's a difference. The Borg adapt. They learn. They will return, and they will be prepared for your tactics. Unless you adapt faster than they do, assimilation is inevitable. It's simply a matter of time. He pulled up schematics of a Borg cube. Fascinating technology. A collective consciousness achieving perfect efficiency through complete subordination of individual will. Another form of balance, though one I find philosophically repugnant. You find something repugnant? Worf's tone carried bitter irony. The being who advocates mass murder, objects to the Borg's methods? Thanos turned his full attention to the Klingon security chief. I advocate mercy killing to prevent suffering, Commander. The Borg advocate the complete erasure of individual consciousness in service of technological perfection. I preserve the sanctity of death. They pervert the sanctity of life. There's a profound difference. Semantics, Sella interjected. You're both monsters who view others as resources to be managed or consumed. The only difference is scale and methodology. Perhaps, Thanos acknowledged, but at least I'm honest about what I am. Your empire enslaves entire worlds while calling it strategic incorporation. The Federation imposes its values on developing civilizations while hiding behind the Prime Directive. Everyone believes they're righteous. I simply believe I'm necessary. Picard seized the opening. Then help us become unnecessary. If your analysis of our resource challenges is accurate, and I'm not conceding that it is, then work with us to find solutions that don't require killing half the galaxy. Why would I do that, Captain? Because you said you came from a place where idealism died. You watched your world tear itself apart because no one would make the hard choices. Picard stepped closer, his voice intense. But you're not on Titan anymore. You're in a universe where we've made different choices, where cooperation has created abundance, where diversity has created strength. Maybe we'll fail eventually. Maybe your mathematics will prove correct. But we deserve the chance to prove you wrong. Thanos was silent for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Sella laughed, a harsh, cutting sound. How very, Starfleet? Appeal to his better nature. Convince him to waste his power on impossible idealism. She addressed Thanos directly. The Federation will use you, drain your knowledge, and then discard you the moment you become inconvenient. They'll study your technology, learn your weaknesses, and ultimately view you as a threat to be neutralized. I offer you something better. Partnership without illusions. Help the Romulan Empire secure its future, and we'll help you secure yours. And what future would that be, Commander? Thanos asked. I no longer have the Infinity Stones. My universal balancing is impossible here. What would you have me do? Apply your strategic genius to our conflicts, Sella replied without hesitation. The Federation has held too much power for too long. With your knowledge and our determination, we could shift the balance of power in this quadrant. Not through genocide, but through tactical superiority, controlled expansion, strategic resource acquisition. You spoke of mathematics. Help us optimize our survival equation? You're asking me to become a warlord for hire, Thanos observed. I'm asking you to be what you've always been, a being willing to make difficult choices while others wring their hands. Sella's eyes gleamed. Or would you prefer to waste your time trying to convince the Federation that their precious ideals are unsustainable? They'll never accept it, Thanos. Humans would rather die believing in hope than live accepting hard truths. Data's positronic brain processed the exchange at lightning speed. Captain, I believe Commander Sella is attempting to present a false dichotomy. She implies Thanos must choose between Federation idealism and Romulan pragmatism, when in fact numerous alternative paths exist. Including? Thanos asked, genuinely curious. Independence, Data replied. You possess significant power and knowledge. You could establish yourself as a neutral party, offering consultation to various factions while pursuing your own research into this universe's properties. Or you could seek to return to your own universe. Or you could simply observe and adapt, forming judgments over years rather than days. Thanos' lips quirked in what might have been a smile. The android makes a compelling point. I'm not obligated to choose sides in your conflicts. Picard felt a surge of hope. Precisely. Stay with us as an observer, not a prisoner. Learn about the Federation without commitment. If you conclude we're wrong, you can walk away. But give us a genuine chance to demonstrate that another way is possible. And what do I offer you in return for this cultural exchange? Insight, Picard replied. You've seen thousands of civilizations rise and fall. You understand resource management and population dynamics in ways we don't. Help us identify our blind spots without imposing your solutions. Be an advisor, not an executioner. Sella's expression turned contemptuous. You'd waste a strategic asset on advisory sessions? How perfectly Federation. I'd respect a sentient being's autonomy while benefiting from his unique perspective, Picard corrected. It's called diplomacy, Commander. You should try it. Thanos looked between them, the Starfleet captain offering partnership through respect, the Romulan commander offering power through alliance. His next words would determine whether this quadrant faced a potential philosopher ally or a strategic nightmare. I will accept neither offer, Thanos finally said. Not yet. Both Picard and Sella began to object, but Thanos raised a hand for silence. You both make compelling arguments corrupted by self-interest. Captain Picard wants to neutralize me through philosophical conversion. Commander Sella wants to weaponize me through strategic partnership. I will not be converted, and I will not be weaponized. He gestured to the star charts still rotating above them. Instead, I will do what I originally stated. Observe. I will travel this quadrant, visit your worlds, speak with your people, analyze your societies. Not as a guest of the Federation or an asset of the Romulans, as an independent agent. That's unacceptable, Worf stated flatly. You cannot be allowed to move freely through Federation space. Then I'll move freely through non-Federation space, Thanos replied. The galaxy is vast, Commander. Your Federation controls perhaps 3% of it. I'll explore the rest. Picard's mind raced. Letting Thanos roam freely was dangerous, but trying to stop him by force would be catastrophic and might push him directly into Romulan hands. If you travel as an independent observer, at least agree to periodic check-ins. Share your findings. Allow us to provide context for what you observe. Acceptable, Thanos said. I'll maintain communication with your vessel. But understand, Captain, I'm not asking permission. I'm extending courtesy. My ship is repaired enough for travel, my weapons are operational, and neither your fleet nor the Romulan Armada can stop me if I choose to leave. The blunt truth of that statement hung in the air. Sella's eyes narrowed. If you won't ally with us, at least tell me this. What did you make of our empire from your research? Thanos regarded her with something that might have been respect. The Romulan Star Empire is what happens when intelligence serves self-interest without broader vision. You're brilliant tacticians trapped in strategic myopia. You could be so much more than you are, but you're too busy protecting what you have to imagine what you might become. The insult was delivered so matter-of-factly that it took Sella a moment to register it. When she did, her face flushed with rage. And the Federation? She demanded. The Federation is what happens when idealism lacks the courage to face its own limitations. You could fail spectacularly, but at least you'd fail reaching for something better. Thanos moved toward his command throne. Now, if we're finished here, I have a universe to explore. Captain, I'll contact you in 1 week with my initial observations. Commander, you're welcome to track me if you can. I suspect it will be educational for both of us. As transporters engaged to return both parties to their ships, Picard couldn't shake the feeling that they'd just witnessed something profound. Thanos hadn't chosen sides. He'd rejected the entire paradigm. And somehow, that was more frightening than any alliance could have been. 7 days passed in a state of controlled anxiety. Thanos' Sanctuary 2 moved through space like a probe sent to map an alien world, methodical, purposeful, and unsettlingly efficient. Starfleet intelligence tracked his movements as best they could. A visit to the independent trading post Marva 4, 3 days observing a Ferengi commerce hub, a brief stop at a Federation colony world where he spent hours in their archives. He avoided major military installations, but seemed drawn to population centers, markets, resource distribution networks. The Enterprise maintained its patrol route along the neutral zone, but Picard's thoughts were never far from the Mad Titan. Each night brought new reports, new questions, new concerns about what conclusions Thanos might be drawing. On the 8th day, as promised, he made contact. Captain Picard. Thanos' image filled the view screen, his command throne visible behind him. I've completed my initial survey. I have questions. I'm listening, Picard replied, Riker and Data flanking him on the bridge. I visited a Federation colony world, New Providence, established 43 years ago. Population 20,000, mostly human with significant Vulcan and Andorian minorities. Replicator technology ensures no one goes hungry. Medical care is universally available. Education is free and comprehensive. By all measures, it should be paradise. It is one of our success stories, Picard confirmed cautiously. Then why, Thanos asked, did I encounter 3 separate protests about resource allocation? Why are there political factions fighting over whether to expand mining operations or preserve wilderness? Why do your paradise dwellers still compete for status, for influence, for resources that your technology claims to make abundant? Data responded with characteristic precision. Human psychology evolved in environments of scarcity. Even when material needs are met, individuals still compete for social capital, creative fulfillment, and personal meaning. These conflicts are qualitatively different from survival-based resource competition. Are they? Thanos leaned forward. I spoke with a woman who'd been waiting 3 years for approval to expand her agricultural research facility. The materials exist. The replicators could produce them instantly. But she's trapped in administrative bureaucracy, committees, impact studies, consensus building. She has resources in abundance, but cannot access them because your society has replaced scarcity of materials with scarcity of authorization. Picard frowned. Bureaucracy exists to prevent hasty decisions that might harm the collective good. It's not perfect, but it's inefficient, Thanos interrupted. And inefficiency is waste. Waste is a form of scarcity. You've simply moved the bottleneck, Captain. Instead of fighting over food and energy, your people fight over permission and approval. The conflict remains. Only the currency has changed. Riker stepped forward. That's a cynical interpretation. Administrative oversight prevents the tragedy of the commons. Without coordination, everyone pursuing their individual interests would deplete shared resources. Which proves my point, Thanos replied. Even with post-scarcity technology, you still fear resource depletion. Your entire society is built on managing scarcity you claim doesn't exist. He gestured off screen. I also visited the Ferengi. Now there's an honest society. They openly admit resources are finite, competition is natural, and acquisition is the measure of worth. Crude perhaps, but at least they're not pretending mathematics don't apply to them. The Ferengi are motivated solely by profit, Picard said tightly. They exploit, they manipulate, they treat everything, including people, as commodities. And you don't? Thanos' expression was almost pitying. Captain, I accessed Federation trade agreements with dozens of non-aligned worlds. You trade advanced technology for dilithium mining rights. You provide medical assistance in exchange for strategic basing privileges. You call it mutual cooperation, but the mathematics of exchange are identical to Ferengi commerce. The only difference is your self-deception about your motives. The bridge crew exchanged uncomfortable glances. Picard felt his diplomatic composure straining. There's a fundamental difference between mutually beneficial exchange and exploitation, he said carefully. We don't coerce, we don't manipulate. We offer assistance and accept help in return. Do you? Thanos pulled up a data file. Stardate 42761.3. The Enterprise negotiated mining rights on Ventex 2 by helping their population overcome delusions about a mythological contract. Stardate 43385.6. You brokered a treaty with the Aldeans by curing their genetic degradation in exchange for technology and resource access. Stardate 44362. Enough, Picard said sharply. Yes, we engage in exchange, but we also provide assistance without expectation of return. We've saved countless civilizations from disasters, conflicts, and diseases without asking for anything. True, Thanos acknowledged, but only within your Prime Directive constraints. You help societies that are already warp-capable, already established, already possessing sufficient technology to be useful partners. Pre-warp civilizations, no matter how much they suffer, receive nothing. Your compassion has a technological threshold. That's selection bias masquerading as ethics. Data tilted his head. The Prime Directive exists to prevent cultural contamination and developmental interference. It is a manifestation of respect for societal autonomy. It's a manifestation of convenient morality, Thanos countered. You can't help everyone. So you've created a philosophical framework that justifies helping only those who are already partially developed. It soothes your conscience while preserving your resources. The accusations stung because they touched on debates that had raged within Starfleet for decades. Picard had personally struggled with Prime Directive decisions that left populations to suffer while the Enterprise stood by, bound by regulations. You're not wrong that the Prime Directive is imperfect, Picard admitted, but the alternative, intervening in every civilization's development, would make us overlords, not explorers. We'd be imposing our values, our choices, our timeline on species that deserve to find their own paths. Yet you impose those values on warp-capable civilizations constantly, Thanos noted. You pressure them to join your federation, adopt your principles, integrate into your economic and military structures. The only difference is that you wait until they're technologically sophisticated enough to be useful allies before you start the cultural assimilation. That's not, Riker began, but Picard raised a hand. What would you have us do differently? The captain asked. Genuinely, Thanos, if you find our approach flawed, what's your alternative that doesn't involve genocide? Thanos was quiet for a moment, and when he spoke, his tone carried something unexpected, uncertainty. I don't know, he admitted. In my universe, the problem was scarcity, with no solution except reduction. Here you have abundance that creates new forms of scarcity. The Ferengi embrace scarcity as natural. The Romulans hoard resources through conquest. You replicate material goods but cannot replicate ambition, creativity, or purpose. Everyone is seeking answers to the same equation with different variables. Perhaps, Picard said carefully, that suggests there isn't one answer. That different approaches work for different civilizations, and the goal should be coexistence rather than conformity to a single model. Relativism, Thanos replied. The philosophical refuge of those who can't commit to objective truth. But I'll consider it. He shifted topics abruptly. I have another question. This Q entity that appears in your logs, an omnipotent being who tests your species. You've encountered him multiple times. Picard suppressed a groan. Unfortunately, yes. Q is powerful, capricious, and considers humanity's development his personal entertainment. I want to meet him. The bridge fell silent. Of all the things Thanos might have requested, that was perhaps the most unexpected and dangerous. Q doesn't take requests, Picard said carefully. He appears when he wishes, usually to test us or torment us. I can't summon him. But he monitors you, Thanos pressed. He's invested in humanity's development, by your own accounts. And I represent something he's never encountered. A being from another universe with philosophical positions that challenges tests. If he's truly omnipotent and curious, my presence should intrigue him. Intrigue isn't the word I'd use, Riker muttered. More like provide ammunition. As if summoned by discussion alone, space twisted. Reality folded in on itself with the casual disregard for physics that marked only one being in this universe. A flash of light, and there he was, Q, in his Starfleet Admiral's uniform, appearing on the Enterprise bridge with theatrical timing that would have been comedic if he weren't genuinely one of the most powerful entities in existence. "Did someone mention my name?" Q announced with false innocence. "How delightful. And here I thought this week would be boring." He turned toward the view screen where Thanos' image remained. Well, well, what do we have here? The Mad Titan? The Great Balancer? The being who thought he could improve the universe with simple arithmetic and an infinity gauntlet. Q snapped his fingers, and suddenly he was standing beside Picard, examining Thanos like a curator studying an exotic specimen. "Tell me, did it work? Did your mass murder create the paradise you imagined?" Thanos' expression remained neutral, but his eyes narrowed with interest. "You're Q, an omnipotent being existing outside conventional spacetime. Fascinating. In my universe, entities of your power level were limited in scope. You seem to have no such constraints." "Omnipotent is such a crude term," Q said with exaggerated modesty. "But yes, I can do essentially anything. Create, destroy, alter reality at whim. Yet here you are, a refugee from another universe, still clinging to your utilitarian genocide as if mathematics could substitute for wisdom." He turned to Picard. "Mon Capitaine, you've collected quite the pet. What's next? Daleks? Cybermen? Sauron himself?" "This isn't a game, Q," Picard said wearily. "Everything is a game, Picard. The only question is whether you're playing or being played." Q circled back to face the view screen. "So, Thanos, you wanted to meet me. Here I am. What did you hope to learn? How to regain your Infinity Stones? How to return to your universe? Or were you hoping I might snap my fingers and solve your philosophical crisis? I wanted to understand if beings of absolute power inevitably become agents of chaos, or if purpose can coexist with omnipotence," Thanos replied. "You test species, you impose trials, yet you don't simply reshape them into ideal forms. Why?" Q's expression shifted. For a moment, something genuine showed through his theatrical persona. "Because that would be boring, and because forcing perfection isn't the same as achieving it." He snapped his fingers again, and suddenly both he and Thanos stood face to face in what appeared to be an endless void, though somehow Picard and his crew could still observe. "Let me show you something, Titan." The void surrounding Q and Thanos suddenly filled with images, entire civilizations rising and falling in accelerated time. Picard and his crew watched from the Enterprise bridge, witnesses to something that transcended normal reality. "This," Q said, gesturing grandly, "is the Matero civilization. 3 billion years ago, they achieved what you might call post-scarcity perfection. Unlimited energy from their star, matter synthesis, genetic engineering that eliminated disease and aging, paradise by most definitions. The images showed gleaming cities, content populations, technological marvels that made Federation science seem primitive. And within 2,000 years, they ceased to exist," Q continued. "The cities began to crumble, not from war or disaster, but from simple abandonment. Not because of resource depletion or overpopulation. They died of meaninglessness. When every need is met, when every desire can be fulfilled instantly, when death itself is optional, what's left? They had eliminated struggle so completely that they eliminated purpose. The last Matero simply chose to stop existing because existence had become unbearably pointless." Thanos watched impassively. "A civilization that couldn't adapt to abundance. Tragic, but it proves my point. Unlimited resources don't solve the fundamental problem of existence." "Does it?" Q snapped his fingers, and new images appeared. "The Cyrillians, they faced the opposite problem, resource scarcity on a dying world. A being much like you appeared, offering to balance their population. Cut it in half, double the resources per capita. They accepted. Do you know what happened?" The images showed a civilization torn by civil war. Families divided over who should live and who should die. Societies fragmenting as groups fought to be counted among the survivors. The randomness of selection breeding paranoia and resentment. "They destroyed themselves within 50 years, Q said softly. "Not from scarcity, but from the trauma of selection. The survivors couldn't live with the guilt. The society couldn't function with half its knowledge, skills, and relationships severed. Your mercy killed them more surely than starvation would have. One example, Thanos replied, though something flickered in his eyes. I've saved thousands of worlds. For how long? Q waved his hand, and new visions appeared. Worlds Thanos had balanced in his own universe. Some thrived as he'd claimed, but others descended into chaos, their populations psychologically shattered, their societies unable to recover from the collective trauma. You're so focused on the mathematics that you miss the variables that don't fit in equations. Culture, psychology, meaning, the intangibles that make civilizations more than just population statistics. From the Enterprise bridge, Picard leaned forward, fascinated despite himself. Q was doing something unexpected, engaging seriously with Thanos rather than simply mocking him. Why show me this? Thanos asked. You could simply eliminate me, send me back to my universe, trap me in a pocket dimension, yet you're trying to… What? Teach me? Because you're interesting, Q admitted, and for once his tone carried no sarcasm. Omnipotence is tedious, Thanos. I've seen everything, done everything, can do anything. The only thing that holds my attention is watching limited beings struggle with impossible questions. And you're a limited being who actually tried to answer the impossible question. You failed spectacularly, but at least you tried. I didn't fail in my universe, Thanos said quietly. I succeeded. The snap worked. Half of all life gone. Balance achieved. And then? Q asked. In your timeline, what happened after your great balancing? Did the universe suddenly become paradise? Or did populations simply begin growing again? Did new conflicts emerge over the trauma you'd inflicted? Did civilizations collapse from losing half their knowledge base, their infrastructure, their families? Thanos was silent, and that silence spoke volumes. Q continued, gentler now. You're not a monster, Thanos. Monsters don't agonize over their choices. You're a mathematician who mistook the universe for an equation. But existence isn't math. It's messy, contradictory, beautiful, and terrible all at once. The continuum learned that eons ago. We could impose perfection, but we don't, because perfection imposed is indistinguishable from extinction. Then what's the answer? Thanos demanded, and for the first time, Picard heard genuine frustration in his voice. If abundance leads to meaninglessness and scarcity leads to suffering, if intervention is wrong and non-intervention allows catastrophe, what's the answer? Q smiled, not his usual smirk, but something almost compassionate. There isn't one. That's the point. The universe doesn't have solutions, only trade-offs. The Mataro failed because they thought they could eliminate struggle. You failed because you thought you could eliminate competition for resources. Both of you believed there was a final answer, a permanent solution. But the only constant in the universe is change, and the only wisdom is learning to adapt rather than control. He snapped his fingers, and suddenly they were back in normal space. Q on the Enterprise bridge, Thanos on his view screen. The Federation, Q said, addressing Picard now, understands this imperfectly. They're idealists who sometimes forget that idealism requires constant maintenance, constant adaptation, constant willingness to question their own assumptions. But at least they're trying to find balance through cooperation rather than calculation. You're defending them? Thanos asked, genuinely surprised. I'm observing that they've survived longer than civilizations with 10 times their resources because they're flexible enough to evolve. Q turned to Picard. Though they do need periodic reminders of their limitations, which is where I come in. Picard had been silent through Q's lesson, but now he spoke. Thanos' Q is insufferable, and his methods are questionable, but he's not wrong. The Federation isn't perfect. We struggle constantly with the gap between our ideals and our reality. But we learn. We adapt. We try to do better. While I simply tried to do what was necessary, Thanos said, something like bitterness in his tone. No, Picard replied firmly. You tried to do what was final, what was permanent, what would remove the need for future choices and struggles, but that's not how life works. Evolution, biological, cultural, philosophical, requires challenges to overcome. Remove the challenges, and you remove the capacity for growth. Data added his perspective. In my study of organic life, Captain, I have observed that meaning derives from overcoming obstacles, not from their absence. A being that never faces scarcity, never learns conservation. A society that never faces conflict, never develops diplomacy. The struggle is not the problem to be solved. It is the context that makes solutions meaningful. Thanos looked at the android with something approaching respect. You're not alive in the conventional sense, yet you understand life better than most beings I've encountered. Perhaps because I observe without the biases that come from survival instincts, Data suggested. I am not driven by resource competition, yet I find existence meaningful through learning and growth. This suggests meaning is not contingent on scarcity or abundance, but on purpose. Q clapped slowly. The Tin Man speaks truth. Remarkable. He turned back to Thanos. So here's my gift to you, Mad Titan. I'm going to show you something that should be impossible. A civilization that actually solved the equation you couldn't. Before anyone could object, Q snapped his fingers. The Enterprise bridge vanished, replaced by an observation platform overlooking a massive spherical structure in deep space. Thanos, somehow physically transported from his ship, stood beside them. What is this? The Titan asked. A Dyson sphere, Geordi breathed, his visor processing the incredible engineering before them. A megastructure enclosing an entire star to capture its full energy output. We encountered one before, but nothing like this scale. The Cytherians built this 12 million years ago, Q explained. They solved your resource problem, Thanos. Total energy capture from their star. Population controlled through voluntary reproduction limits. Perfect balance achieved through cooperation and engineering, rather than genocide. He paused. Want to know what happened to them? The sphere's surface began to shift in their view, revealing cities, parks, vast areas of carefully managed civilization. They're still there, Thanos said slowly, still thriving. For 12 million years, Q confirmed, no wars, no famines, no collapse. Perfect utilitarian success. He snapped again, and suddenly they were inside the sphere, walking through streets populated by beings of elegant design. Humanoids with crystalline features, moving with calm purpose. A Cytherian approached them, or rather, approached Q, whom they seemed to recognize. They communicated through melodic tones that the universal translator rendered as, "Greetings, questioner. You bring new students?" "Always," Q replied. "Tell them about your civilization." The Cytherian turned to Thanos. "We are the Cytherians. We achieve balance through mathematics and cooperation, much as you once attempted through force. Our population is stable at 4 billion, maintained through cultural norms and personal choice rather than coercion. Our energy needs are met completely. Our society has no crime, no poverty, no suffering." "Paradise," Thanos said, but his tone suggested skepticism. "Stagnation," the Cytherian corrected gently. "We solved the problems of survival 12 million years ago. Since then, we have not evolved, have not changed, have not produced anything genuinely new. We maintain, we persist, we exist, but we do not grow. We traded the chaos of development for the peace of perfection, and in doing so, we traded our future for an eternal present." The words hung in the air like an indictment. "You regret your achievement?" Picard asked quietly. "We neither regret nor celebrate," the Cytherian replied. "We simply observe that perfection is another form of ending. You younger species, with your conflicts and inefficiencies, your passions and contradictions, you are alive in ways we ceased to be eons ago. We envy you your struggles because they mean you still have the capacity to become something other than what you are." Q addressed Thanos directly. "This is what your balance achieves in its most successful form. Not catastrophe or collapse, but eternal stasis. The Cytherians are the best-case scenario of your philosophy, and even they understand what it costs them." Thanos stood silently, his expression unreadable. Finally, he spoke. "If this is the outcome of perfect balance, and chaos is the outcome of unlimited growth, then what's the middle path? What's the answer that allows both the stability and evolution?" "The Federation attempts it," the Cytherian said, "though imperfectly. They maintain enough challenge to drive innovation, enough stability to prevent collapse. They struggle constantly, question constantly, adapt constantly. It is inefficient by our standards, but it is alive by any standard that matters." Q snapped his fingers one final time, returning them all to the Enterprise bridge. Thanos back to his view screen connection. "So there's your lesson, Titan," Q said with a theatrical bow. The universe doesn't need your balance. It needs the beautiful chaos of beings trying, failing, learning, and trying again. The Federation succeeds not because they've solved the equation, but because they've accepted that the equation can't be solved, only managed moment by moment, decision by decision. With another flash, Q vanished, leaving behind only an echoing laugh and a crew struggling to process what they'd witnessed. Thanos stared at the view screen from his command throne, his expression showing more uncertainty than at any point since his arrival. "Captain Picard," he finally said, "I require time to consider what I've seen. I will continue my observations, but I will reconsider my assumptions. Q has given me much to contemplate." "Take all the time you need," Picard replied. "But know this, whether you choose to embrace our way or reject it, we'll continue striving, because that's what we do." The transmission ended, leaving the Enterprise bridge in contemplative silence. "Did Q just help us?" Riker asked incredulously. "Q helped Q," Picard replied. "He was bored and found a new toy. But yes, inadvertently, he may have shown Thanos something we couldn't, that even perfection has its price." In the depths of space, Thanos sat alone on his throne, replaying the encounter. For the first time in centuries, his certainty wavered, and in that wavering, the possibility of change took root. But in the shadows of the Gamma Quadrant, other eyes had been watching. The Dominion had detected the dimensional breach, tracked the powerful newcomer, and made their own calculations about what he represented. The Founders were not interested in philosophy, they were interested in order, and Thanos, willingly or not, would soon face a third option beyond Federation idealism and Romulan pragmatism, the option of absolute control. The transmission came through subspace channels that technically didn't exist, frequencies the Federation had never cataloged, encryption that made Romulan codes look primitive. Data's console lit up with warnings as the signal penetrated the Enterprise's communications array without triggering any of their security protocols. "Captain," Data said, his fingers working rapidly across his station, "we are receiving a transmission of unknown origin. The signal bypassed all our security measures and is specifically requesting to speak with Thanos." Picard stood. "Can you trace it?" "The signal is being routed through 17 different subspace relay points, many in regions we've never mapped. However, the final routing suggests origin in or near the Gamma Quadrant." Data paused, his positronic brain processing implications. "Captain, the last relay is near the Bajoran wormhole." The bridge crew exchanged uneasy glances. The Dominion. It had to be. "Patch it through," Picard ordered, "and get me Thanos on a parallel channel." The view screen split. On one side, Thanos appeared from his command throne. On the other, a face that sent chills through everyone who recognized it. A Vorta. The Dominion's diplomatic face. Female with the characteristic violet eyes and obsequious smile that masked ruthless calculation. "I am Weyun," the Vorta said with a slight bow. "Speaking on behalf of the Founders of the Dominion. We wish to extend greetings to the being called Thanos, who has recently arrived in our reality." Her smile widened. "We have been observing with great interest." "The Dominion has no business in Federation space," Picard said firmly, though he felt ice in his veins. If the Dominion had been monitoring Thanos since his arrival, they'd have detailed intelligence on his capabilities and philosophy. "I am addressing Thanos, not the Federation," Weyun replied with barely concealed contempt. "Though Captain Picard, you may listen if you wish. It concerns you as well." She turned her full attention to Thanos. "The Founders have reviewed your encounters with Federation personnel in this Q entity. Your philosophy regarding balance and resource management is compelling. We believe you would find the Dominion's approach to these matters far more aligned with your own principles than the Federation's naive idealism." Thanos leaned forward slightly. "The Dominion, shapeshifters who rule through genetically engineered soldiers and cloned administrators? An interesting model for imposed order." "The Founders are gods," Weyun said with religious fervor. "They created the Vorta and Jem'Hadar to serve them, to bring order to a chaotic universe. Before the Founders imposed their vision, the Gamma Quadrant was torn by wars, resource conflicts, and suffering. Now, under Dominion control, there is peace, stability, purpose." "Peace through subjugation," Picard interjected. "The Dominion conquers worlds and enslaves their populations. They're everything you claim to oppose, Thanos. using force to impose their vision on others. The Federation imposes its vision through cultural assimilation and economic dependence, Weyoun countered smoothly. At least the Dominion is honest about the nature of order. Control is not evil, Captain. It is necessary. And the founders, in their wisdom, have created a system that functions perfectly. No resource waste, no political instability, no chaos. Thanos' expression was unreadable. You've achieved efficiency through genetic engineering and forced loyalty. The Jem'Hadar are addicted to a substance only the Dominion provides, ensuring absolute obedience. The Vorta are cloned with programmed devotion to the founders. This is balanced through biological slavery. It is balanced through biological optimization, Weyoun replied without shame. The Jem'Hadar are perfect soldiers, strong, loyal, incapable of doubt. The Vorta are perfect administrators, intelligent, diplomatic, devoted to order. And the founders are perfect leaders, capable of infiltrating any society, immune to most conventional weapons, possessing perspective that spans centuries. Each species fulfills its designed purpose. Is that not more efficient than the Federation's chaos of countless species all struggling to coexist? Data spoke up. Efficiency is not synonymous with morality. The Dominion system denies free will to the Jem'Hadar and Vorta. They cannot choose their paths or question their purposes. By definition, they are not free. Freedom, Weyoun said with a dismissive wave, is the luxury of beings who have not yet learned that structure provides meaning. The Jem'Hadar do not suffer existential crises. The Vorta do not waste energy on doubt. They serve the founders and find complete fulfillment in that service. Is that not preferable to the anxiety and confusion your Federation members experience constantly questioning their place in the universe? It's preferable for those who benefit from their service, Picard said coldly, not for those denied the choice. Weyoun turned back to Thanos. You understand, don't you? You've seen thousands of civilizations destroy themselves through internal conflict and inefficiency. The Dominion has solved that problem. The founders impose order, and order prevents the chaos that leads to resource depletion and suffering. Our model could extend to the entire Alpha Quadrant if we had the right allies. You're recruiting me, Thanos observed. We're offering partnership, Weyoun corrected. The founders have observed your strategic brilliance, your willingness to make difficult choices, your understanding of the mathematics of survival. With your knowledge of another universe's technologies and tactics, combined with the Dominion's resources and organizational structure, we could bring true balance to this quadrant. The Federation, the Klingons, the Romulans, all struggling inefficiently, wasting resources on conflicts that serve no one. We could unify them under rational governance. You mean conquer them, Riker said. Conquest and unification are distinguished only by perspective, Commander, Weyoun replied. The Federation itself was formed by bringing disparate worlds under a single governmental structure. The Dominion simply extends this principle. And unlike the Federation, we do not pretend our subjects have meaningful autonomy. We are honest about the nature of control. Thanos was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice carried a dangerous edge. Weyoun, your founders have created an elegant system. Biologically engineered loyalty, chemical addiction as control mechanism, shape-shifting infiltrators to eliminate dissent before it forms. Remarkably efficient. He paused. It's also fundamentally corrupt. Weyoun's smile faltered. Corrupt? In my universe, I sought to impose balance impartially. Random selection, no exceptions, no favorites. Rich and poor alike, powerful and powerless, all subject to the same mathematics. The Dominion has simply created a hierarchy where the founders place themselves at the apex and engineer all other species to serve them. That's not balance, that's tyranny with a biological basis. The founders created the Vorta and Jem'Hadar, Weyoun protested. They have the right. No one has the right to create sentient beings programmed for servitude, Thanos interrupted, and his voice carried cold fury. I killed trillions to prevent suffering. The founders create trillions designed to never question their suffering. I am a mass murderer. They are slavers. One of these is more honest than the other. Picard felt a surge of unexpected respect for Thanos. Whatever his flaws, the Mad Titan's philosophy at least operated on consistent principles. The Dominion's hypocrisy offended him in ways the Federation's idealism didn't. Weyoun's composure cracked slightly. You would reject the Dominion's offer? Reject the opportunity to work with the most powerful force in the Gamma Quadrant? I would reject any offer that asked me to perpetuate a system built on genetic slavery, Thanos replied. The Federation is naive. The Romulans are cynical, but the Dominion is something worse. True believers in their own righteousness while building their paradise on the backs of beings bred to have no choice. At least my victims could curse my name. Your Jem'Hadar and Vorta can't even conceive of cursing the Founders. The Vorta's violet eyes narrowed. Then you have made yourself an enemy of the Dominion. Have I? Thanos smiled, a terrifying expression. Wei-Yun, tell your Founders that I am not the ally they imagined, but I'm also not their enemy. I'm an observer who finds their system philosophically repugnant, but tactically instructive. If they wish to engage with me further, they may do so honestly rather than through recruitment offers dressed as philosophy. The Founders do not accept rejection well, Wei-Yun warned. You possess knowledge and capabilities that could threaten Dominion security. We cannot allow such threats to remain uncontrolled. Then attempt to control me, Thanos said quietly. Send your Jem'Hadar fleets. Send your Vorta manipulators. Send your Founder infiltrators. I've faced armies that span galaxies. I've killed beings who thought themselves gods. Your Dominion is formidable by local standards, but I am not local. The transmission cut off from the Dominion side, leaving only Thanos on the view screen. Picard exhaled slowly. That was either very brave or very foolish. Perhaps both, Thanos acknowledged. But I meant what I said. The Dominion's philosophy is everything I despise. Control for its own sake, hierarchy for the benefit of those at the top, slavery disguised as optimization. At least the Borg are honest about assimilation. The Founders pretend they're providing purpose to species they created specifically to have no other purpose. You've made them an enemy, Worf observed. The Dominion controls vast resources and territory in the Gamma Quadrant. If they decide you're a threat, then they'll attack, and I'll defend myself, Thanos said simply. Commander Worf, I've faced impossible odds before. The question is whether your Federation will stand with me or attempt to use this as an opportunity to contain me. Picard considered his options. The Dominion was already a looming threat. Starfleet intelligence suggested they were building for eventual invasion of the Alpha Quadrant. An alliance between the Dominion and Thanos would be catastrophic, but Thanos rejecting them opened other possibilities. If the Dominion attacks you, they attack in our space, Picard said carefully. That makes it our concern. But I need to know, if we defend you, will you commit to not pursuing your balancing philosophy in Federation territory? Thanos looked at him with those ancient eyes. Captain, Q and your Cytherian encounter gave me much to consider. I'm not ready to abandon my principles, but I'm willing to acknowledge they may require refinement. The Federation's approach has flaws, but so does mine. Perhaps there's wisdom in observing further before acting. That's not a commitment, Riker noted. No, Thanos agreed. It's honesty. I won't promise to embrace your ideals, but I will promise to continue evaluating them. And I will promise this. If the Dominion attempts to conquer this quadrant, I will oppose them. Not for your sake, but because their philosophy disgusts me more than any I've encountered. Data spoke up. Captain, if I may, the strategic calculus suggests that Thanos opposing the Dominion serves Federation interests regardless of his broader philosophical positions. The Dominion represents an existential threat. Thanos represents an ideological challenge. One is immediately dangerous. The other is theoretically dangerous. You're suggesting we accept him as an ally of convenience, Picard said. I am suggesting we accept reality as it presents itself, Data replied. Thanos has rejected both Romulan and Dominion offers. He has demonstrated willingness to engage with our philosophy even if he hasn't accepted it. And he possesses capabilities that could prove decisive against the Dominion. Refusing that advantage due to philosophical concerns would be strategically inadvisable. Picard looked at his android officer with renewed appreciation. Data had just argued for pragmatism over principle. Unusual for him, but perhaps a sign of his own growth. Very well, Picard said, making his decision. Thanos, the Enterprise will provide tactical support if the Dominion attacks. But understand, this doesn't make us allies in any broader sense. You're still under observation, and any action you take that threatens Federation citizens will be met with force. Acceptable, Thanos replied. I ask nothing more than the opportunity to continue my observations without interference from powers seeking to either recruit or eliminate me." The communication ended, leaving the Enterprise bridge in tense silence. "Sir," Worf said quietly, "we just made an arrangement with a being who has committed genocide on an unimaginable scale." "I know," Picard replied heavily, "but we also just prevented the Dominion from gaining an ally who could tip the balance of power in their favor. Sometimes, Commander, we don't get to choose between good options and bad options. We choose between bad options and worse options." "And which is which in this case?" Troy asked softly. Picard had no answer, because the truth was, he wasn't entirely sure. In the Gamma Quadrant, on a planet whose shape constantly shifted, the Founders gathered in their Great Link. They shared thoughts, experiences, perspectives, and they reached consensus. Thanos represented both threat and opportunity. He would not join them willingly. But there were other ways to acquire useful assets. The Jem'Hadar were already being briefed. The Vorta were already planning. And somewhere in the Alpha Quadrant, a Founder infiltrator received new orders. Study the Titan. Find his weaknesses. And when the time comes, bring him before the Founders in chains. The war that wasn't yet a war had just moved closer to inevitability. The attack came 3 days later, not against Thanos directly, but against a Federation colony that had recently received his visit. Vega 9, a small outpost with a population of 8,000, primarily researchers studying unique crystalline formations in the planet's crust. Thanos had spent 2 days there, speaking with scientists about resource extraction methods and sustainable mining practices. Now it was burning. "Red alert," Picard commanded as the distress signal flooded the Enterprise's communications array. "All hands to battle stations. Worf, report." 16 Jem'Hadar attack ships decloaking in orbit around Vega 9, Worf said, his voice tight with controlled fury. "They're bombarding the surface. Colony shields are failing. Time to intercept? 17 minutes at maximum warp. Too long. Far too long." Picard's hands clenched on his armrest. "Contact Starfleet Command. Get me any ships in the sector. And find Thanos. Now." Data's console chirped. "Captain, I am receiving a transmission from Sanctuary 2. Thanos is already en route to Vega 9. He will arrive approximately 6 minutes before we do." On the view screen, the tactical display showed Thanos' vessel moving at velocities that should have been impossible for a ship of its size and apparent damage state. Somehow, he'd coaxed speeds from his engines that exceeded even the Enterprise's maximum warp. "Sir," Geordi called from engineering, "his warp signature is completely different from anything I've seen. It's like he's compressing space differently, more efficiently. His ship shouldn't be capable of warp 9.7, but my readings say he's hitting 9.8. He's had 1,000 years to perfect warp technology in his universe," Data observed. "It is logical that he would have refined principles we are still developing." The 6 minutes felt like hours. When they dropped out of warp at Vega 9, the scene that greeted them was chaos. 16 Jem'Hadar attack ships swarmed around the colony, their polaron beams cutting through what remained of the settlement's shields. But they were no longer firing at the surface. They were firing at Sanctuary 2. Thanos' warship hung in the center of the Jem'Hadar formation, like a predator surrounded by wolves. His shields shimmered purple and black, that same dimensional energy that had marked his arrival. And the Jem'Hadar weapons simply dissipated against them without effect. "Captain," Worf said with something like awe in his voice, "the Jem'Hadar have been firing continuously for 4 minutes. They haven't scratched his shields. Return fire pattern from Sanctuary 2, Data reported. He is not using conventional weapons. Energy signature suggests directed gravitational manipulation. He is creating localized singularities and projecting them at the Jem'Hadar vessels." As they watched, a lance of warped space erupted from Thanos' ship toward the nearest Jem'Hadar attack ship. The Dominion vessel's shields held for perhaps 2 seconds before collapsing. The hull crumpled inward, crushed by impossible gravitational forces. The ship imploded in silence, compressed to a sphere no larger than a shuttlecraft before the singularity dispersed. "Merciful gods," Riker breathed. "He's going to destroy them all," Troy said, her empathic senses reeling from the focused rage emanating from Sanctuary 2. "His anger is... I've never felt anything like this. It's cold, calculated, but absolutely murderous. Two more Jem'Hadar ships died in the next 30 seconds, crushed by gravitational weapons that turned Federation understanding of physics into irrelevant suggestions. The remaining 13 broke formation, attempting to scatter. Thanos didn't let them run. "Hail him," Picard ordered, "before this becomes a massacre." Thanos' face appeared on the view screen, and for the first time since his arrival, he looked truly dangerous. Not philosophical, not contemplative, just cold, ancient fury given form. "They attacked a civilian colony," Thanos said without preamble. 8,000 beings who had nothing to do with our conflicts. They bombed them to draw me out, to make a statement about Dominion power. This is not strategy. This is terrorism. "Stand down," Picard said firmly. "We'll help you disable their ships, but wholesale slaughter will make you everything you claim not to be." "Everything I claim not to be." Thanos' laugh was bitter. "Captain, I've killed trillions. What I claim to be is someone who kills with purpose, not with casual cruelty. The Dominion killed civilians to get my attention. They've earned what comes next. If you destroy these ships, you confirm everything Weyun said about you being a threat," Picard argued. "You prove you're uncontrollable, unpredictable, dangerous. Every power in this quadrant will unite against you. Let them." Another Jem'Hadar ship crumpled under gravitational assault. "I didn't ask to be brought to this universe. I didn't seek conflict with the Dominion. They attacked innocents to test me. This is my answer." Worf spoke up, his voice carrying unexpected understanding. "Captain, in Klingon culture, if an enemy attacks civilians to draw you into battle, honor demands overwhelming response. To show restraint would be seen as weakness, inviting further attacks." "This isn't about Klingon honor," Picard snapped. This is about mathematics," Thanos interrupted. "If I show mercy now, the Dominion interprets it as weakness. They'll attack more colonies, kill more civilians, escalate until I respond. By responding decisively now, I reduce future casualties. It's the same calculus I've always used, Captain. The only difference is the scale." Data interjected. "Captain, 32 Jem'Hadar reinforcements are arriving via warp, ETA 4 minutes. If Thanos continues engaging alone, he will be overwhelmed." Picard faced an impossible decision: stand aside and let Thanos destroy the Jem'Hadar ships, becoming complicit in what could be called murder, or intervene and risk both the Dominion's wrath and Thanos' fury. Either choice had catastrophic implications. "Red alert," he said quietly. "All weapons, target the Jem'Hadar vessels. Worf, set phasers to disable their propulsion and weapon systems. We're ending this fight, not the ships." Thanos' expression shifted slightly, surprise perhaps, or calculation. "You're helping me?" "I'm protecting a Federation colony from Dominion aggression," Picard replied. "What happens after is subject to negotiation. But right now we have 3 minutes to neutralize 13 ships before 32 more arrive. Can your gravitational weapons disable without destroying?" Thanos considered for perhaps 2 seconds. "Yes, though it's inefficient." "Efficiency isn't always the highest value," Picard said. "Sometimes survival requires compromise. Engage alongside us. Disable, don't destroy, and we'll face the reinforcements together." What happened next became the stuff of Starfleet tactical training for years to come. The Enterprise and Sanctuary II, vessels from different universes with completely different tactical philosophies, fought in perfect coordination. The Enterprise's phasers stripped shields while Thanos' gravitational weapons crippled engines and weapon systems without crushing the ships entirely. In 90 seconds, 13 Jem'Hadar attack ships drifted helpless in space, their crews alive but their vessels combat ineffective. Then the reinforcements arrived. 32 Jem'Hadar ships dropped out of warp in attack formation, and with them came something else. A Vorta command ship, larger than the attack vessels, bristling with weapons that Federation intelligence had only theoretical data on. Weyun's face appeared on all communications channels simultaneously. "Thanos, Captain Picard, the Dominion gave you the opportunity for peaceful cooperation. You rejected it. Now you face the consequences of defying the Founder's will. Surrender or be destroyed." "You attacked a civilian colony," Picard responded coldly, "an act of war against the United Federation of Planets. I should be telling you to surrender." "The Federation is not at war with the Dominion," Weyun replied. "Not yet. This is a localized response to a threat to Dominion security. Thanos represents unknown technology and capabilities from another universe. The Founders cannot allow such variables to remain uncontrolled. Turn him over to us, Captain, and the Federation need not be involved further. Not happening, Picard said flatly. Thanos spoke up, his voice carrying across both channels. Weiyun, you made a tactical error. You assumed I would respond with mindless rage to your colony attack. You expected me to destroy your ships in fury, marking myself as the monster you claimed I was. Instead, Captain Picard reminded me that even justified anger can be expressed with precision. Your ships are disabled, not destroyed. Your crews are alive, ready to return to your Founders with a message? What message? Weiyun asked, his confidence wavering slightly. That I am not the weapon you imagined. That I will not become the agent of chaos you can use to justify your expansion into the Alpha Quadrant. And that if you attack civilian populations again, disabled ships will be the kindest response you receive. Thanos paused. Also, tell them that their Jem'Hadar addiction mechanism is remarkably inefficient. The Ketracel white dependency could be eliminated with relatively minor genetic adjustments, but that would remove your control mechanism. The Founders keep their soldiers artificially dependent, not because it's necessary, but because it's convenient. I've seen thousands of control systems across the galaxies. Yours is among the most cynically designed. The transmission carried to every Jem'Hadar ship in the system. On those vessels, genetically engineered soldiers who had never questioned their dependency on the white suddenly heard someone explain that their addiction was a choice their gods had made, not a biological necessity. Weiyun's face went pale. You're attempting to turn the Jem'Hadar against the Founders. That's impossible. They're programmed to worship the Founders, Thanos finished. Yes, I've reviewed their genetic sequences. Fascinating work, actually. But even the deepest genetic programming can't completely override self-awareness once that awareness is catalyzed. I'm not turning them against the Founders. I'm simply telling them a truth they've never been allowed to hear. What they do with that truth is their choice. Jem'Hadar don't make choices, Weiyun shrieked, his diplomatic composure shattered. They serve! They obey! His transmission cut off as multiple Jem'Hadar ships broke formation. Not attacking, not fleeing, just hesitating, questioning. For beings who had never experienced doubt, the sensation was overwhelming. All ships, Weiyun's voice returned, shaking with fury. Full attack pattern. Destroy Thanos' vessel and disable the Enterprise. The Founders demand... The Founders, came a new voice, deep Jem'Hadar, filled with something that might have been wonder or horror, made us slaves. We never knew. The Jem'Hadar fleet didn't attack. They simply held position, their crews grappling with an existential revelation that their genetic programming hadn't prepared them for. Captain, Data reported, I am detecting massive subspace disturbances. Multiple warp signatures approaching. Starfleet vessels, 3 Galaxy-class starships, and a fleet of support vessels. ETA 2 minutes. Starfleet Command had sent reinforcements. The tactical balance was shifting decisively against the Dominion. Weiyun made his calculation quickly. This isn't over. The Founders will remember this. All of you. His ship turned, and within seconds, the Vorta command vessel and the still-functioning Jem'Hadar ships vanished into warp, leaving behind their disabled comrades and a colony whose population was shaken but alive. As the immediate threat passed, Picard finally allowed himself to breathe. They'd survived. The colony had survived, and Thanos had shown restraint when he could have shown overwhelming force. Thanos, Picard said, as Starfleet vessels began dropping out of warp around them. What you did with the Jem'Hadar, revealing their dependency was manufactured, that was brilliant and dangerous. The Founders won't forgive it. I know, Thanos replied, but it was necessary. The Dominion's power rests on genetic slavery. Undermine that foundation, and their entire system begins to question itself. I may have just started a revolution within their military forces, or you may have doomed every Jem'Hadar to execution by the Founders, Riker observed grimly. Perhaps, Thanos acknowledged, but at least they'll die knowing they were slaves. That's more than they had before. As Starfleet vessels moved to secure the disabled Jem'Hadar ships and begin evacuation of Vega Nama's surviving population, Picard realized something profound had just shifted. Thanos had fought not with genocidal fury, but with tactical precision. He'd shown mercy when expected to show massacre, And most importantly, he'd chosen to fight alongside the Federation rather than use the situation to demonstrate his independence. It wasn't trust, it wasn't alliance. But it was something, a shared recognition that some threats required cooperation to counter, and some lines couldn't be crossed without losing whatever moral authority justified action in the first place. "Captain," Thanos said as his transmission began to close, "I still don't agree with your Federation's optimism. I still believe you're vulnerable to collapse you refuse to acknowledge. But today, you taught me that restraint can be as powerful as overwhelming force. Perhaps there's wisdom in that. Perhaps." The screen went dark, leaving Picard staring at the stars beyond. Did he just? Troy struggled for words. "He learned something," Picard finished quietly. "And so did we. The question now is whether those lessons lead toward cooperation or inevitable conflict." In the Gamma Quadrant, the Founders gathered again in their Great Link, and for the first time in their ancient existence, they experienced something they'd thought themselves immune to. Doubt. Not about their superiority, but about their certainty. Thanos had struck not at their ships or territory, but at the philosophical foundation of their power. And aboard the disabled Jem'Hadar vessels, being tractored toward Starfleet facilities, soldiers bred for war contemplated a question they'd never been allowed to ask. What if the Founders weren't gods? What if they were just very powerful beings who'd lied about everything? The answer to that question would reshape the Dominion. But that was a story for another day. The Dominion's response was both subtle and devastating. Over the following weeks, Starfleet intelligence reported increasing instability within Jem'Hadar forces throughout the Gamma Quadrant. Some units refused orders. Others demanded explanations about the Ketracel White dependency. A few even attempted to reach Federation space seeking asylum or answers, or simply freedom from the gods who'd built chains into their DNA. The Founders' solution was characteristically ruthless. They executed entire battalions, liquidating units that showed signs of doubt. But each execution only proved Thanos' point. The Founders maintained control through fear and genetic manipulation, not divine right. The link was fracturing, not in its unity, but in its certainty that their created species would remain forever loyal. And then the Founders made their boldest move. "Captain," Data's voice carried urgency as his console erupted with alerts. "I am detecting a massive subspace distortion near Starbase 375. Energy signature consistent with..." The view screen showed it before he could finish. A spatial rift tearing open, but not like the one that had brought Thanos to this universe. This was cruder, more violent, powered by technology rather than dimensional accident. Through it poured ships, dozens of Jem'Hadar attack vessels, Cardassian warships, and at the center, a massive Dominion battlecruiser. But it was the transmission that made Picard's blood run cold. "Captain Picard, Thanos of Titan." The voice belonged to a Founder, not transmitted through a Vorta intermediary, but directly. The figure on screen shifted constantly, features flowing like liquid, never quite settling on a single form. "I am one of the Founders. You have interfered with Dominion interests and corrupted our soldiers with dangerous ideas. This cannot stand." "You're in Federation space," Picard said, his voice steel. "Whatever grievances you have with Thanos, they don't justify an invasion." "Invasion is such an unpleasant word," the Founder replied, its form settling temporarily into something humanoid. "Think of this as retrieval. Thanos possesses knowledge and technology from another universe. The Dominion requires that knowledge to maintain order. He will accompany us voluntarily, or we will take him by force. And we will destroy every Federation vessel and installation that stands in our way." The tactical display was nightmare fuel. 43 Dominion vessels against Starbase 375 and its small defensive fleet. The Starbase had perhaps 6 hours before its shields failed. And while Starfleet vessels were racing to reinforce, they wouldn't arrive in time. "Thanos," Picard said, opening a channel. "Where are you?" "Approaching Starbase 375 from the opposite vector," Thanos replied, his vessel already visible on long-range sensors. "The Founders believe they can force my hand by threatening your people. They're correct. I won't allow thousands to die because of me. But they've miscalculated badly." "How so?" "They think I'm alone." Thanos' expression showed something that might have been a grim smile. "Captain, during my observations, I've been doing more than studying your Federation. I've been establishing Relationships. The space around Starbase 375 shimmered, and suddenly it wasn't just Sanctuary 2 approaching. 3 Klingon birds of prey decloaked, their weapons hot. Then 2 Romulan warbirds emerged from the nebula where they'd been hiding. And strangest of all, a Ferengi Marauder-class vessel that looked like it had been heavily modified with weapons it absolutely shouldn't possess. "What is this?" Worf demanded, staring at the tactical display with something like professional respect and personal horror. "A coalition?" "Not a coalition," Thanos corrected. "Mutual interests. I've spent weeks talking with various powers in this quadrant. The Klingons remember the Dominion's invasion attempts during the war. The Romulans see the Dominion as a strategic threat to their territory, and the Ferengi..." He paused. "Let's just say I explained how Dominion expansion would disrupt their trade routes and access to resources. Everyone has reasons to oppose the Founders that have nothing to do with ideology." Data processed this rapidly. "Captain, Thanos has assembled a temporary alliance of convenience based not on shared values, but on shared opposition to Dominion expansion. Strategically brilliant, philosophically disturbing." "He's using our conflicts against each other," Picard said quietly, "but in this case, using them to protect us." The Founders' form rippled with what might have been anger. "You've allied with Klingons, Romulans, even Ferengi. These are our enemies, or should be yours. This proves you're nothing but a warmonger seeking power." "No," Thanos replied, and his voice carried absolute conviction. "This proves I understand something the Dominion doesn't. Power comes not from genetic engineering and forced loyalty, but from recognizing that even enemies can share common interests. The Klingons fight for honor, the Romulans for strategic advantage, the Ferengi for profit, the Federation for principles. We don't agree on philosophy, but we agree the Dominion's model of conquest through biological slavery is unacceptable." Commander Sella's face appeared on a secondary channel, addressing Picard directly. "Don't mistake this for friendship, Picard. The Romulan Empire stands with Thanos today because the Dominion threatens our interests tomorrow. But make no mistake, this changes nothing between our peoples." A Klingon general on another channel growled his agreement. "The House of Martok fights beside no one permanently, but today we fight beside Thanos because he fights with honor against those who have none. Tomorrow we may be enemies again. Today we are warriors against slavers." The Ferengi captain, a daimon named Gant, chimed in with typical Ferengi bluntness. "The Mad Titan paid me 17 bars of gold-pressed latinum to bring my ship here. But even if he hadn't, I'd come. The Dominion is bad for business. They don't trade, they conquer. Can't profit from a quadrant ruled by shapeshifters who think they're gods." Picard realized what Thanos had accomplished. In weeks, he'd done what the Federation had struggled to achieve for years. Created a temporary alliance of Alpha Quadrant powers united against the Dominion, not through idealism or diplomacy, but through cold calculation about shared interests. "Impressive coalition," the Founder said, though its tone suggested otherwise. 43 Dominion vessels against, what, 10? 12? The mathematics favor us." "The mathematics," Thanos said quietly, "are about to change." Sanctuary 2's weapon systems came online, and the space around Starbase 375 began to distort. Not just near his ship, but in multiple locations simultaneously. Data's console screamed with warnings. "Captain, he's creating localized gravitational anomalies across the entire battlefield. Multiple singularities generating tidal forces that will disrupt standard formation tactics. The Dominion fleet cannot maintain cohesion in this environment." The Founder's expression, if a constantly shifting face could show expression, revealed something like concern. "What are you doing?" "Imposing balance," Thanos replied. "Your 43 ships against our 12 in normal space? Your advantage. But I don't fight in normal space when I can change the battlefield itself. Now your ships must navigate gravitational riptides while mine are already adapted to irregular space-time. You wanted to test me? Here's your test." The battle that followed defied every tactical doctrine in Starfleet's databases. The Dominion fleet attempted to maintain formation, but Thanos' gravitational manipulation turned local space into a maze of tidal forces and warped geometry. Ships that ventured too close to the anomalies found their shields compressed, their weapons arcs distorted, their navigation systems screaming contradictory data. Meanwhile, the Allied fleet, coordinated by Thanos' impossible ability to calculate three-dimensional space-time distortion in real time, moved through the chaos like they owned it. Klingon birds of prey struck from impossible angles, appearing from behind gravitational lenses that shouldn't allow passage. Romulan plasma torpedoes bent around distortion fields, hitting targets from unexpected vectors. Even the Ferengi Marauder, equipped with some kind of modified shield generator, weathered hits that should have destroyed it. And Sanctuary 2 moved through it all like a conductor directing an orchestra of destruction. "Target the anomaly generators," the Founder commanded. "Find the source of the distortions and eliminate it." But there was no source to eliminate. Thanos was generating the gravitational effects directly from his ship's exotic matter engines, technology that Federation science couldn't even properly classify, let alone counter. Every time the Dominion adapted to one anomaly pattern, he shifted to another. "Captain," Worf reported, barely suppressed excitement in his voice, "the Dominion fleet is breaking formation. They cannot coordinate effectively in the distorted space. We are winning." Picard watched the tactical display with mixed feelings. They were winning, yes, but at what cost to the established order? Thanos had just demonstrated he could reshape local spacetime as a weapon. What stopped him from using that power to balance populated worlds? As if reading his thoughts, Thanos opened a private channel. "Captain, I see your concern. You're wondering if the being who can twist space itself might use that power for his original purposes." "The thought occurred to me," Picard admitted. "The answer is yes, I could, but I won't. Not because I've abandoned my philosophy, I haven't, but because Q and your Cytherians showed me that imposed balance creates its own problems. The Founders tried to impose their vision through genetic engineering. It's fracturing. I tried to impose balance through the snap. Q showed me the aftermath. Trauma, collapse, stagnation. Perhaps the only sustainable balance is the one that emerges from free beings making free choices." "You believe that?" Picard asked quietly, even as the battle raged around them. "I'm considering it," Thanos replied, "which is more than I've done in 1,000 years. Your universe is teaching me things, Captain. Uncomfortable things. That mathematics alone doesn't capture the complexity of existence. That control creates problems even as it solves them. That maybe, the chaos you embrace isn't weakness, but adaptation." On the main view screen, the Founder made its final calculation. Its fleet was being systematically disabled, not destroyed, but rendered combat ineffective by impossible gravitational tactics and coordinated strikes from enemies who shouldn't be able to work together. Continuing the battle meant losing valuable ships and soldiers for no gain. "This isn't over," the Founder said, its form shifting with what looked like fury. "You've protected him today, but Thanos represents a threat to order that the Dominion cannot ignore. We will return. We will adapt. And we will bring the Titan before the Founders, willing or in chains. Try it," Thanos said simply. "And next time, I'll show you what my ship can do at full capacity. Today was restraint, Founder. Remember that." The Dominion fleet withdrew through their spatial rift, leaving behind 12 disabled vessels in a starbase that had come within hours of destruction, but ultimately survived intact. As the Allied fleet began to disperse, Klingons, Romulans, and Ferengi all departing without ceremony or thanks, as was their way, Picard found himself in another conference with Thanos. "You created an alliance of our enemies," Picard said. "You demonstrated weapons technology that rewrites our understanding of tactical physics. You told the Founders you were holding back, implying you could have done worse. What exactly are you trying to accomplish?" "Survival," Thanos replied. "Theirs and mine. The Dominion needed to understand that I'm not a resource to be acquired or a threat to be eliminated. I'm a reality to be accepted. And the various powers of this quadrant needed to understand that their petty conflicts are luxuries they can afford only because existential threats like the Dominion haven't yet forced them to unite." "You're playing kingmaker," Riker observed, "deciding which conflicts matter and which don't." "I'm playing observer who occasionally participates when the mathematics of survival demand it," Thanos corrected. "Captain, your Federation will face crises in the coming years. The Borg, the Dominion, threats you haven't yet imagined. When those crises come, you'll need to set aside ideological purity and make practical alliances. Today was a demonstration of that principle." Data spoke up. "You are attempting to teach the Federation pragmatism through example rather than argument. Fascinating approach." Because arguing hasn't worked, Thanos said. Captain Picard defends his principles eloquently, but principles that prevent survival become philosophical suicide. I wanted to show that even powers that hate each other can cooperate when facing common threats. That purity of ideology is less important than flexibility of response. Picard felt the weight of truth in those words, uncomfortable as they were. The Federation had struggled for years to build coalitions against the Dominion. Thanos had done it in weeks by abandoning ideology for interest. What happens now? Troy asked. The Dominion won't forgive this. They'll come back stronger, more prepared. And the alliance you built was temporary. It won't hold for a sustained campaign. It doesn't need to hold, Thanos replied. It just needs to exist as proof that cooperation is possible when necessary. The next time the Dominion threatens, the Klingons, Romulans, and others will remember that they fought together once. That memory makes future cooperation easier. You're planting seeds, Picard realized, for an alliance that doesn't yet exist but might be necessary someday. Exactly. Thanos stood from his throne. Captain, I've learned much from your universe, but I've also taught it some things. The lesson of today is simple. Survival sometimes requires compromising principles without abandoning them entirely. You can be idealists who occasionally act like pragmatists. That's not hypocrisy. That's wisdom. The transmission ended, leaving the Enterprise bridge in contemplative silence. He manipulated us, Worf said finally. He used Federation territory as bait to draw the Dominion out, then demonstrated his power to multiple factions simultaneously. We were pieces in his strategy. Yes, Picard agreed, but we also survived because of it. The question is whether that makes him an ally or simply a very effective chess player who occasionally moves pieces to our benefit. Does the distinction matter, Data asked, if the outcome serves our interests? It was a question that would haunt Picard for months to come, because the android was right. Functionally, pragmatically, Thanos' manipulation had protected Federation citizens and demonstrated to the Dominion that the Alpha Quadrant wouldn't be easily conquered. But philosophically, accepting help from a self-admitted mass murderer felt like a betrayal of everything Starfleet represented. Except Thanos was changing. Slowly, perhaps reluctantly, but changing nonetheless. The being who'd arrived ready to impose balance through genocide had just fought a battle where he deliberately disabled enemy ships rather than destroying them, where he'd built an alliance rather than acting alone, where he'd defended civilians he had no obligation to protect. Was that growth, manipulation, or something more complex, a being genuinely grappling with philosophical questions he'd thought settled centuries ago? Maintain surveillance on Sanctuary 2, Picard ordered, and compile everything we've learned about gravitational manipulation tactics. If Thanos can teach us that much, the Dominion certainly learned something too. We need to understand what we saw today before we face it again, from either friend or foe. As the Enterprise set course for Deep Space Nine to debrief with Starfleet Command, one thing was certain. Thanos had permanently altered the strategic landscape of the quadrant. What remained unclear was whether he'd done so as a gift, a warning, or simply as the natural consequence of a being who understood power in ways this universe was only beginning to grasp. In the Great Link, the founders shared a troubling consensus. Thanos was not just powerful. He was teaching their enemies to be powerful together. That made him more dangerous than any weapon, any fleet, any technology. He had to be neutralized, not killed. That would make him a martyr. Not recruited, he'd proven impossible to control. He had to be isolated, discredited, forced into a position where his power became irrelevant, and the founders had a plan for exactly that, one that would exploit the very principles he'd been learning from the Federation, one that would turn his growing conscience against him. The trap was being set, and neither Thanos nor the Federation saw it coming. The trap revealed itself 3 weeks later, and it was more insidious than any direct assault could have been. A Bajoran transport ship carrying refugees from a Cardassian labor camp sent out a distress signal near the Badlands. Their engines were failing, life support compromised, and they had perhaps 4 hours before catastrophic systems failure. Standard emergency protocol, except for one detail that made every alarm in Picard's mind scream warnings. Thanos' Sanctuary 2 was the closest vessel, by a margin so convenient it couldn't possibly be coincidence. Captain, Data reported from his station, I am detecting 3 cloaked vessels in the region. Romulan signatures, but the cloaking frequency is slightly off. I believe they are Dominion vessels using captured Romulan technology. A setup, Riker said immediately. The Founders are watching to see what Thanos does. Picard stared at the tactical display, seeing the pieces arrange themselves with horrible clarity. If Thanos rescued the refugees, he'd confirm he was changing, becoming something other than the remorseless utilitarian he claimed to be. The Dominion could use that to manipulate him through hostages and moral dilemmas. If he didn't rescue them, he'd reveal that his recent cooperation was purely strategic, confirming Federation suspicions that he remained fundamentally dangerous. Either way, the Founders learned something valuable. And either way, beings died or were used as pawns. "Get me Thanos," Picard ordered. "Now." The view screen showed Thanos in his command throne, already aware of the distress signal. His expression was unreadable, but his hands gripped the armrest with enough force to leave impressions in the metal. "Captain," Thanos said quietly, "I see the trap. 3 cloaked vessels observing. Refugees who will die if I don't act. The Founders testing whether I've developed exploitable weaknesses. Obvious, crude, effective." "What are you going to do?" Picard asked, though he thought he already knew. "What I must." Thanos stood, and suddenly he looked every one of his 1,000+ years. The mad Titan would calculate the strategic value of refugees against the tactical advantage of revealing nothing to the Dominion. He would let them die to protect information security. But that being... "I'm not entirely sure I'm him anymore." Troy spoke softly from her position. "You're conflicted. I can sense it. Part of you wants to prove you're still the mathematician, still operating on pure logic. But another part learned from Q that even omnipotence doesn't mean you should use it casually. Learn from the Cytherians that perfect balance is another form of death. Learn from your captain that sometimes the illogical choice is the moral one." Thanos moved toward his ship's transporter controls. "I'm going to rescue them, and the Founders will learn exactly what they wanted to learn, that I've changed enough to be predictable, that I can be manipulated through compassion." "Then don't go alone," Picard said suddenly, making a decision that defied every regulation and protocol. "The Enterprise will assist. If this is a trap, we spring it together." "Captain," Worf began, but Picard raised a hand. "The Dominion wants to isolate Thanos, to make him vulnerable by making him care. We deny them that advantage by showing that his actions aren't weaknesses to exploit, but principles we share. If caring about civilian casualties is a tactical vulnerability, then the entire Federation is vulnerable, and I won't concede that ground to the Founders." Thanos stared at him through the view screen, and for the first time since his arrival, something like genuine respect showed in his ancient eyes. "You're protecting me from the consequences of my own growth." "Interesting. Why?" "Because the alternative is a universe where compassion is weakness and calculation is strength," Picard replied. "If the Founders win that argument, everyone loses, including them. Eventually. Now let's go rescue those refugees before we debate philosophy further." The joint rescue operation was textbook perfect. Enterprise's transporters and Sanctuary 2's superior shields combined to extract all 47 refugees from the failing transport seconds before its warp core breached. Medical teams beamed directly to both ships, Dr. Crusher treating the most critical cases while Thanos, surprisingly, opened his own medical bay to handle overflow patients. And through it all, the 3 cloaked Dominion vessels watched and recorded. When the last refugee was safely aboard and receiving treatment, the Founders' transmission came through. "Predictable," the shapeshifter said, its form settling into something vaguely humanoid, but deliberately unsettling. "The great balancer, the mathematician who killed trillions, has become soft, vulnerable. You risked tactical intelligence to save 47 lives. The old Thanos would have let them die without hesitation." "The old Thanos," Thanos replied calmly, "operated in a universe where that calculation made sense. Here I've learned the mathematics are more complex than I understood, but you're correct about one thing. I am vulnerable now. I care whether beings suffer unnecessarily. That's a weakness you can exploit." The Founders' liquid features shifted into what might have been a smile. "Finally, honesty. Yes, we can exploit this. Every time you act on compassion rather than calculation, you give us leverage. We can create situations where you must choose between strategic advantage and civilian lives. Each choice weakens you further." "You're assuming," Picard interjected, that compassion is weakness. It's not. It's strength constrained by ethics. And ethical beings operating together are more formidable than calculated individuals operating alone. Today proved that. Today proved that Thanos can be manipulated, the founder countered. And soon, Captain Picard, you'll face your own choice. The Dominion is coming to the Alpha Quadrant in force. When that war begins, you'll need allies like Thanos. Powerful, willing to make difficult choices, unconstrained by your precious regulations. But those allies come with costs. How much will you compromise your principles to gain the power you'll need to survive? The transmission cut off, leaving silence in its wake. They're right, you know, Thanos said after a moment. When their invasion comes, and it will come, you'll need beings like me. Tacticians who think in terms of acceptable losses and strategic necessities. Your idealism won't survive first contact with Jem'Hadar fleets and founder infiltrators. You'll either adapt or you'll fall. Perhaps, Picard acknowledged, or perhaps we'll find a third option you haven't considered. We have before. Data's console chirped. Captain, the refugee ship is transmitting a message. It appears to be directed at Thanos specifically. On the view screen, a Bajoran woman appeared, elderly, bearing the scars of Cardassian occupation on her weathered face. She spoke in heavily accented Federation standard. I am Kira Meru. We were told we would die today unless rescued by someone called Thanos, a being from another universe, a killer of billions. She paused, tears streaming down her face. I don't know if that's true. I don't know what you've done in your past, but I know what you did today. You saved us when you had no obligation to do so. When doing so gave your enemies information they could use against you. That's not weakness. That's courage. More faces appeared behind her. Bajorans, humans, even a few Cardassians who'd been political prisoners rather than occupiers. All alive because Thanos and the Enterprise had acted. Thank you, Kira Meru said simply. Whatever you were, whatever you become, today you were a savior. We'll remember that. The transmission ended, and in the silence that followed, Picard saw something on Thanos' face he'd never expected to see. Uncertainty. Not about tactics or strategy, but about identity itself. I killed trillions, Thanos said quietly, as if testing the words against this new reality. Ended civilizations. Orphaned children by the billions. And these people thank me for saving 47 of them. The mathematics don't balance. The scales don't equilibrate. Because morality isn't mathematics, Picard said gently. It's not about scales balancing. It's about choices, moment by moment, where we decide who we want to be. And who am I? Thanos asked, and the question carried the weight of 1,000 years of certainty crumbling. The mad titan who enforced balance? The refugee from another universe learning new philosophies? The tactical asset that various powers want to control or eliminate? The being who saved refugees to prove he's changed, or because he actually has changed? Counselor Troy leaned forward, her voice soft but clear. You're all of those things and none of them. Identity isn't fixed, Thanos. It's fluid, constantly shaped by choices and experiences. You've been in this universe for less than 2 months, but you've already become someone different from who arrived. The question isn't who you are, it's who you're becoming. Data added his perspective with characteristic logic. In my study of growth and change, I have observed that beings often resist evolution because it means abandoning certainty. You were certain for centuries about your purpose, your methods, your philosophy. This universe has introduced doubt. Doubt is uncomfortable, but it is also the prerequisite for wisdom. Thanos was silent for a long moment, processing perspectives he would have dismissed as irrelevant months ago. Finally, he spoke. The Dominion will invade. Your Federation will call for my help, probably through intermediaries rather than officially. I'll provide it because the Founder's slavery-based system offends me more than your naive idealism. We'll fight together, and you'll be grateful for my tactical knowledge and weapon systems. And all the while, you'll wonder if you've made a deal with a monster who's simply better at hiding his nature. Possibly, Picard admitted, but we'll also wonder if we witnessed something rarer. A being genuinely wrestling with questions of right and wrong after centuries of believing he had all the answers. That struggle is valuable, Thanos. Don't abandon it just because it's uncomfortable. Comfort, Thanos said, standing from his throne with renewed purpose, is for beings who've never questioned themselves. I'm done with comfort. He moved toward his ship's controls. "Captain Picard, I'm returning to independent operations. Not fleeing, observing, processing, trying to reconcile what I was with, what this universe is teaching me I could become. But know this, when the Dominion invades in force, I will stand with the Federation. Not because I've embraced your ideals completely, but because I've learned enough to know that some systems deserve to survive and others deserve to fall." "That's enough," Picard said. "For now, that's more than enough." As Sanctuary 2 prepared to depart, Riker spoke quietly to his captain. "Sir, we just allied with a mass murderer and encouraged his philosophical crisis. Starfleet Command is going to have questions." "Let them question," Picard replied, watching Thanos' ship begin to move away. "We've just witnessed something extraordinary, a being who thought he was beyond change, changing. Whether it leads to redemption or something else remains to be seen. But I'd rather face an uncertain Thanos questioning his purpose than a certain Thanos convinced of his rightness." In sickbay, Dr. Crusher worked alongside her staff to treat the rescued refugees. One of them, a young Bajoran man, asked her a question that she'd been avoiding thinking about. "Doctor, is it true? The man who saved us? Did he really kill billions in his universe?" Crusher paused, considering how to answer. Finally, she spoke the truth. "Yes, he did terrible things, driven by beliefs he thought were absolute truths. But people can change, not erase their pasts, but learn from them, grow beyond them. Whether he's doing that, we'll find out together." Aboard Sanctuary 2, Thanos sat alone in his command throne, staring at data streams showing Federation news broadcasts about the rescue. They called him a hero, an enigma, a potential threat still under observation. All true, all incomplete. For the first time in centuries, Thanos of Titan didn't know what came next, didn't have a plan that stretched across decades, didn't feel the certainty that had driven every action since Titan's fall. And somewhere in that uncertainty, in that space between what he'd been and what he might become, possibility lived. The Dominion would come. War would test every principle the Federation claimed to hold sacred. Thanos would fight in that war, wielding power that could reshape battles and philosophies that could reshape himself. But the outcome wasn't predetermined. The equation wasn't solved. The balance wasn't fixed. For a being who'd spent 1,000 years trying to impose permanent solutions on a universe that refused to stay solved, that uncertainty felt almost like hope. In the Gamma Quadrant, the founders completed their analysis. Thanos was compromised by compassion, vulnerable to manipulation through moral dilemmas, his power diminished by his unwillingness to use it without restraint. They had learned exactly what they wanted to learn, and they prepared for the invasion that would test whether the Federation's principles and Thanos' evolving conscience could survive contact with an enemy that viewed mercy as exploitable weakness. The war was coming. The philosophies would clash, and in the crucible of that conflict, everyone would discover who they truly were when forced to choose between survival and principles, between tactics and ethics, between the beings they'd been and the beings they might become. The Mad Titan's journey through the Star Trek universe had taught him that balance wasn't about mathematics. It was about constant adjustment, perpetual evolution, accepting that the equation could never be permanently solved because the universe kept changing the variables. It was the hardest lesson he'd ever learned, and perhaps, finally, the right one. In the weeks that followed, Thanos became an unexpected fixture in Alpha Quadrant politics, not as a member of any faction, but as an independent force that various powers courted, feared, and tried to understand. He continued his observations, his philosophical debates with Picard, his tactical demonstrations that rewrote Starfleet's understanding of gravimetric weapons. The Dominion invasion, when it came, would be the ultimate test, not just of Federation resolve or Starfleet tactics, but of whether a being who defined himself through certainty and calculation could function in a universe that demanded flexibility and growth. Whether principles could coexist with pragmatism. Whether a mass murderer could find redemption not through erasure of his past, but through acceptance of a different future. The Mad Titan had entered a universe built on hope rather than mathematics, on cooperation rather than control, on the belief that life's value couldn't be calculated in equations of scarcity and abundance. He hadn't embraced that philosophy, not fully, perhaps not ever, but he'd learned to question his own certainty. And in a universe as vast and complex as this one, that questioning was the first step toward wisdom. Thanos of Titan remained dangerous, remained powerful, remained burdened by the weight of trillions of deaths he'd caused in pursuit of a balance that Q and the Cytherians had shown him was ultimately illusory. But he was no longer the mad Titan who'd arrived through that dimensional rift, certain of his purpose and his methods. He was something new, something this universe had shaped through challenges to his assumptions, through beings who refused to accept that mathematics alone could justify existence, through a starship captain who believed in growth and redemption, even for those who thought themselves beyond change. The balance Thanos sought wasn't in killing half of all life or imposing perfect resource distribution. It was in the space between certainty and doubt, between principle and pragmatism, between the being he'd been and the being he might yet become. And as the stars wheeled overhead and the quadrant prepared for the coming storm, one truth remained. The universe didn't need perfect balance. It needed beings willing to strive for better, moment by moment, choice by choice, never achieving perfection, but never stopping the attempt. That was the lesson of the Star Trek universe. And slowly, reluctantly, beautifully, Thanos was beginning to understand.